Welcome to No Drams and No Dragons, the
Oh,
show where we discuss nothing but the infinite void. The
nothing.
Holy War is here. The second apocalypse is coming. How you feeling, Dustin? How you
Oh,
doing?
I'm feeling dark and hopeless. That's how
Yeah,
I'm feeling. The
yeah,
winter blues have set in. Seasonal
hmm
depression is upon us, and
yeah.
got
And
this
to
lovely book.
celebrate, to celebrate all of that, to celebrate the seasonal depression, uh, and all the other shit going on in the world that we're talking about, R. Scott Bakker's
Ah,
novel, The Darkness That Comes Before, the
mhm.
first book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy. Man, we've talked a lot of grimdark, Dustin, but this kind of takes the cake in a whole lot of ways. And
Mm.
yeah, we'll get into that. We will get
Yeah,
into that. And before we do, we're going to drink a little whiskey.
yeah. We'll lighten the mood up a little bit.
Yeah.
Have some merriment before the stuff. We're doing the Arran tonight, right?
We are. We're
Or is it
doing
the
the
Iran?
well, I
What
don't
do you
think it's
got?
Iran. No, Aaron. I think it's Aaron. Aaron 10. It's the Isle of Aaron.
Yeah, I had a I had a tasting from an Arran rep, and he definitely pronounced it as the Arran.
The Aaron. Good. Good
Yeah,
to know. I always assumed it was. I did it was so straightforward. I didn't even check.
yeah.
Um maybe I ought to have checked given how Scottish people pronounce everything, but
Hmm.
Aaron is definitely how I went with it in my head. The Isle of Aaron. This whiskey, this is one I've wanted to try for a little bit. I have not tried it. It's on my
Hmm.
list.
I think for me, I've had Arran 10, but it's been over a decade now, so my taste
Mhm.
buds have forgot it. I remember I liked it. Um, Mostly what I remember is that the rep was a little like he would always refer to it as the Arran, very seriously. So, which I guess is cool. That's my memory though,
yeah.
the Arran, but definitely
Yeah.
the in front of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Definitely the Aaron.
the
Okay.
Arran.
Well, this whiskey comes from the Isle of Arran,
Mhm.
which is basically you have Isla and the islands of Isla and Jura. Remember, we tried Jura.
Mhm.
Was it last time? The time before? Whatever.
I
We
think so.
tried
Yeah.
Jura. That one was great. Jura is like the sister island to Isla. And then if you go towards the Isle of Arran, you come to Campbelltown, that other
Yeah.
whiskey region. And then right on the other
Mhm.
side of the Campbelltown Peninsula, you have the Isle of Arran. So it's like this cluster of whiskey islands. I think this is like the only distillery on the island. It's
Mhm.
like their thing. It's like their distillery.
Mhm.
But it's fairly famous for their whiskey. Their whiskey is supposed to be really good. So yeah.
Yeah, I see here so their main source of water is Loch Nadavi, Loch Nadavi.
All right.
Just
On
a
the
special
island.
source of
Mhm.
fresh water. And for those who don't know, the Arans won a lot of awards too. They're one of it's it's like a ubiquitous. It's one of the big names in whiskey right now. It's pretty hot. It's a very affordable dram too. I'm showing here, let's see, 34 pounds per
Yeah, I
bottle.
mean it can be had. This is just on Total Wine, the local price for where I live. It's like $66. Like it's not an expensive dram by any means.
Mhm.
This is a very affordable whiskey. So it's I'd like to get in here and try
Yeah,
this
let's
now.
check it out.
Let's crack into it.
Let's
I
bust
you
in.
you are ahead of me as usual. I'm like opening it up. You're like getting ready to go. All
I need to
right.
give it some time. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
the bottle smells funky. It takes a couple
Mhm.
minutes for it to.
All right. I got to figure out how to save some of this here. You got to pour like half of it.
Being a good husband.
Crystal wanted to try this, so
Nice.
I'm gonna let her have a sip or two, a couple of sips. I don't think I poured it super evenly, but there's enough in there. She can have a taste and decide if she likes it.
It's very good of you,
All
Gus.
right. All right. So this one comes in at 46%. That's that no chill filtering thing. You got to be up at that 46% to avoid cloudiness. And then you
Okay.
add ice. So,
Oh, which I don't think either one of us do here. Maybe one day.
No, I do every once in a while, just depending on the whiskey, but usually I just prefer my whiskey neat.
Hmm.
I'm not detecting very strong legs on this.
No, it's not too oily.
It's not real oily, not real thick and viscous.
Yeah,
It's sort of a thinner whiskey. I mean, there's a little bit of legs, but not a lot.
to be expected from a 10-year-old. Yeah, hasn't.
Yeah.
What are you getting on that nose, Gus?
Yeah, I'm getting some raisin. I'm getting some vanilla,
I get that. I'm thinking like if you ever had like a scone, tastes scony to me.
sort of vanilla malt combo.
Mm.
I'm getting a lot of sort of the higher, what I would consider to be sort of the higher notes of like the vanilla and stuff, as
Hmm.
opposed to like the deep bass. I know there's no sound here, but it's sort of like you've got like shapes.
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
got like I don't know,
So if you
like a
translated them into
pitch,
sounds,
sounds and
yeah,
pitches. Yeah,
yeah, I like the character of it.
I'm
You know,
actually getting a little apple
okay.
in here, a little bit.
It's funny you mentioned that because my brain is. So we had coca vin for dinner. It was a very
Mm.
rich, like
Coca vin,
coca
vin,
vin.
vin.
Thank you. Coca vin. Yeah,
Coco vin.
cocoa vin. Yeah, it was good. We had it with mashed potatoes with lots of butter in it.
Well, that sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, it's really good. It's got my brain on a savory kick. So when I smell this, I think I'm more focusing on deep stuff. Like I get butterscotch, and it's like a warm,
Mm,
buttery scone. It's kind
I
of
can
what I'm
see the
smelling.
butterscotch. I can see the butterscotch.
Yeah. But yeah, as soon as you mentioned the high stuff, yeah, my brain kind of switched over and I get the apple.
Hmm.
Yeah, like a very, very sweet.
Like a very fresh, like green apple
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, green. Hmm. Yeah, have you ever busted in? Remember back in the day they had the apples dipped in the caramel?
Hmm.
That's kind of what I'm getting from. Nice
Yeah.
fresh caramel
Oh,
dipped apple.
I feeling that. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Like I definitely still picking up some of those raisiny
Hmm.
dried fruit, maybe even dried apricots.
No, I get that too. And it's kind of remember how we get that kind of pot still smell sometimes?
Hmm.
That kind of
Yeah.
reminds me of that.
Yeah. I'm smelling this as being fairly fruity and fairly sweet.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying that.
Yeah,
It's
it's
nice.
nice. It's a good nose.
Yeah. Now, worth noting, this is not a peated whiskey, just
Womp womp.
for people who care about such
Yeah.
things. I
Yeah.
care. No,
I don't care.
I
The kind
care.
you
Y'all
ready to
ready
drink?
to?
Let's
Read
do
my
it.
mind.
Whoa. Apricot. That's what I get.
I agree.
Ooh.
Getting that apricot, I smelled it a little bit now. It really comes across on the palate.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very light, fruity. It's sort of this on the palate. It's like this light, fruity, floral explosion of flavor. There's a
It's
lot
a
of flavors going on.
it's like high in the palate too. It you fit like in the soft
Mm-hmm.
palate on top. You're really like a real aromatic.
Yeah,
Let's see. I don't find it to be smooth.
I agree. It's not particularly smooth. It's pretty sweet, actually. And I mean that in terms of sugar content.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's quite a bit of sweetness up front. Just in terms of actual sugar. It's not like syrupy or something, but it's
Mm-hmm.
for the scotches we've tried, it's on the sweet side. It's got a lot of fruitiness, floral still. I got more of that sort of vanilla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of flavors. The warmth is really lingering for me too. It's very
I'm getting like think about the apricots. I'm talking about like I peaches,
yeah.
like fresh fruit, like
Mm-hmm.
apples, all with that vanilla. I've sort of lost the caramel and the sort of
Mm-hmm.
it was the butterscotch
Yeah, that's
that I've
gone.
got. That's gone, but it's now sort of just really bright fruit flavors. It's really remarkably different from anything else we've had on this show, I would say.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's unique. which gives it a lot of points in my book. Yeah, that's and yeah, the fruit. It's just like a yeah, like you said, it's like a fruit explosion. Very bright.
It's like a fruit basket in a whiskey.
Ooh, there you go. It's a fruit basket.
Now you're gonna kind of focus on the finish. The part that I don't like really is the finish. It's a little. I get a little bitterness on the back of my tongue, back of my throat. A little bitterness. It's very hot. It's
And not
not
in like a pleasant way.
not in a pleasant way, but also, yeah. I mean, it's not so bad of a finish that it's not like heartburn or something. Like sometimes you'll get these, that are like, oh, I gotta go take a Tums now, right? Like it's not that bad. I'm not
quite that bad.
It's not in that category, but it's also not like a pleasantly hot category because there are ones where you're like, ooh, it's warming me. Like this one is sort of like this one's sort of in the middle where it's like not really pleasant. It's not the worst, but it's not a plus. It's a little bit of a minus. Yeah. But then that combined with that little bitterness that it has, I'm not.
And the bitterness persists.
It does.
It's still going.
It's almost like the bitterness you get sometimes if you eat like certain kinds of nuts. Like if you eat certain kinds of nuts and you get this sort of bitterness, it reminds me of that kind of bitterness. I guess like if you eat a nut that's like, I don't know, slightly over roasted or something like you know what I mean? Like a peanut that's over roasted.
Walnuts, I get it a lot with. There'll be a bitter part of the walnut.
So I don't like walnuts.
Yeah, they got the bitterness to it.
So I like pecans. Pecans don't have the bitterness. They're like walnuts without the bitterness. It's so much better.
Pecans are great. Yeah, if it had a nice pecan finish.
Oh, we'd be talking. Yeah, it'd be awesome. But this is sort of more of like that. Like it's like a walnut finish, and I don't like that.
Yeah, it's so weird. I'm going through the process again. It's a pretty cool ride with that because I get heavy butterscotch now on the nose, and then the taste is for me. It's all apricot.
It's not just apricot for me. I'm getting all kinds of fruits, but I agree that the apricot is definitely one of the predominant. I'm getting a little more floral. Little floral, like in a when you do that. I don't know what it's called. Where you get the air and going in like the soft palate kind of.
Yeah.
And I get some like floral notes there.
Cool.
Indefinable. I can't say, oh, it's this flower. Like it's just sort of general flowery. So it's a very fruit forward on the palate, flowery. And I just kind of have to like ignore the finish because it's very pleasant. The smell's very nice. The palate's very nice. And then the finish is just sort of slightly unpleasant, I would say. It's not horrible. It doesn't. Yeah, but it is not great. The finish.
I mean, it kind of makes me want to keep drinking it just to get the taste of the finish out of my mouth. Because everything else is quite pleasant. But the end of it. And this one might be a good candidate to have on the rocks, like have with an ice cube or two. Might mellow that finish out a little bit.
I think part of the thing that I don't like about the finish is it's very oaky. It's like a very oaky finish.
So I'm wondering too, as we keep drinking, we've had a couple of them where once you let the initial bitterness kind of fade, keep drinking it can kind of change the character a little bit. It's not happening yet. I'm waiting though. I have hope.
I really enjoy the smell of this whiskey. I really enjoy the sort of initial like palate, right? The flavor profile. There's a lot I like about this whiskey. That finish is rough.
Yeah.
That finish takes it down a few notches, which is unfortunate because a really great finish on a whiskey can like make it, That one, the Jura, for me, the finish on that was like legendary. I mean, it just was like, I just wanted to like savor it for ages, Yep. This one, or the Octomore, right?
Yeah.
And a finish on that one was crazy.
Yeah.
The finish on this one is like, it's taking this experience that was started out great. And it's just sort of like dampening it, So.
And it's not fading. I'm getting some other flavors coming out as I keep drinking and keep waiting for the finish. But the bitterness.
Tell me.
Still there.
What are you getting?
Well, dried and aged fruit are coming out a little bit more in the finish. And I'm imagining like you walk into a barn almost and you smell fruit that's kind of been on the barn floor. It's slight, like a little aromatic. There's a little bit of that in there for me. So there's a little more to it, but still it's bitter.
Yeah, it's just that bitter finish is really
Yeah.
my only, and it's just the bitters. Like even the warmth is fine. Like honestly, compared to other whiskeys, like it's fine. It's that bitterness on the back end that it's just. Do I recommend the Arran? Um, I don't wholly not recommend it. Uh, yeah, I mean, I'll just leave the review as a testament to, does that kind of finish bother you? Don't buy it.
Are you talking about our book or the whiskey?
I'm talking about
a lot of segues here. Now, like our book, I think, yeah, this has some rough edges to it. It has some really good stuff going to it, going on for it also. But yeah, I would tell people, yeah, get the Jura, get Lagavulin. Well, cool. I think we're in agreement on that, man. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think that's a perfect segue to our book.
Yeah.
Which might leave a bitter taste in people's mouth as well.
Yeah. So that book, just to introduce it again, is The Darkness That Comes Before, first book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Bakker. Apparently a Canadian nihilist. I didn't know that existed, but here we are.
Dude, I didn't know he was a nihilist until, because dude, when I read him, he was just like an author, and I didn't care about his personal life or politics. It was like before Twitter and before you could know what kind of people the authors were. So yeah, it was kind of a surprise that he's like a legit nihilist.
This book is a grim, dark fantasy novel. It came out in 2003, so a couple years before The Blade itself, and although the Joe Abercrombie and all that stuff, but after sort of some other grimdark, like well after the Black Company, and then after some other grimdark, like I mean, it depends who you ask whether George R.R. Martin is grimdark, but
yeah.
But after that stuff, or while that was coming out or whatever, but there's a sort of, just to put him in the context of where he was writing and getting published. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's not like a godfather. He's not like a father of grimdark. I kind of think of him like an edgelord uncle, like an uncle of grimdark.
Yeah, he's certainly not in that fathers of grimdark category, but he was relatively early on the scene. And I don't, grimdark, when he was writing, let's put it this way, grimdark was not a thing. Like it wasn't called grimdark. Nobody was calling it that. The name hadn't even taken hold yet. But this is what he's writing ultimately. There's the basic plot of this book is there's a holy war coming in this world, and in holy war in the sense that like a crusade has been declared, or holy war has been declared by the big religious people, and there's a prophet that's coming, and and as I'm sort of sitting here thinking about all of this, there's a lot. There's a whole bunch of different characters that it follows. It's not one chapter character, but there's a lot of writing in this book for like this much actual plot.
Gus is making his fingers very tiny
for this much. I say this much like you can see the fucking video, right? This much being like not very much. There's a lot of words to convey not really a lot of information. This book has a lot of philosophy in it.
Yeah.
This book has a lot of ideas in it. This book has a relatively slow moving plot. For me, most of the discussion of this book is going to be really about philosophy rather than about what happens in it. There's some battles. There's some people who get killed and some people who have to flee things, and there's this holy war. There's a lot of political machinations.
Yeah. The word that kept popping in my mind was biblical. It was written in kind of a biblical way, if that makes sense. in terms of the like the pacing and the it's very kind of it's in-depth philosophical writing, and it's like if you've read through the Bible, it's kind of similar where there's a whole bunch of words and a whole bunch of paragraphs that are kind of describing something that happens. They're just really flowery elaborating on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bit of that vibe in the book. Um, it's been kind of a challenge for me because I think he changed that after the first book. And
Okay.
and something if you are considering reading this series, you should know that the first book is similar to other series we've had where the first book is kind of like the first act, and it's not really a complete story in that. And I think that that kind of gets in the way of the book a little bit and gets in the way of people enjoying it because really didn't pick
Mm-hmm.
up till the second one, and it's a little less like long form biblical, like describing things and describing philosophies. There's still a lot of that in there, but it's a bit more plot forward. There's more of the meat and potatoes, I would say. But yeah, it's surprising. I guess I was curious. So you're a new reader for this. Most of my memories are pretty dusty. I think I read these, God, 2009, 2010. I was probably reading these. Um, for me, what I remember most about it was a lot of military stuff, a lot of battle stuff. I remember a lot of bad things happening, and I remember kind of trope subversions, um, in terms of like elves and orcs and stuff like that. But the general character of the book, you had a different feel of the character of this book. Like, what would you tell people that this book is about, other than the philosophy and the like? What else is there for people to sink their teeth into with this?
Ooh. Uh, I'll be honest. Like I don't think that much of this book.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I felt like a lot of it was very edge lordy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of characters took the actions that they took because the author wanted to say something about the nature of sort of the world and the nature of power. And it's sort of it's a philosophical work, and they're using fantasy as a platform for that. And I think that's useful for some things. And I think I don't necessarily mean to discount that entirely, but when it's done sort of so nakedly,
Mm-hmm.
I think it detracts from like some of the other ideas that he has in the book, and some of the interesting characters, because there are a couple I think that are interesting characters. I thought Kanire or Skiatha or whatever his name is a
Yeah.
really interesting character. Um,
Yeah, he's
sort of
one of my
stands out.
favorites. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he stands out. He's sort of a barbarian chieftain who's everybody, basically everybody in this book. He loses a battle, or he's on the losing side of a big battle, and then the rest of the book, he's kind of trying to, I don't even like he's trying to get vengeance, basically.
Yeah.
And he's an interesting character. But I felt like a lot of the characters um, were just almost like caricatures of like what what an edge lord thinks that like politicians are or something. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
or like yeah, you get
So
really good. Like there are some really interesting things in this book.
yeah.
I also think there is like this running through this whole book, just philosophically, are things that I like. I just sort of roll my eyes at. So it's like it's hard for me to like really like. It was hard for me to like really get into this when like I'm getting browbeat over the head by like
Yeah, like I get it.
I get it. Nihilism is reality. Okay, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, nobody
Yeah.
has, morality's nothing. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, everybody's
See,
awful. Yeah.
so interesting. It's I love this one because usually we're pretty aligned on our takes with stuff, but I will admit, reading it at this phase of my life, I am also more sensitive to the like underpinnings of the author and the
Mhm.
philosophy that he's pushing. It definitely shone through more
Yeah.
when I went through it this time. Um, I think his strengths, his characterization is really cool. I like his world building. Um, and especially having finished the book, Um, I would put his world building is excellent, and his characters are really well written. Um, the way he writes certain scenes, it especially with anything involving sexual assault kind of stuff. There's a lot of it doesn't shy away from the parts of having and wielding power that are not pleasant. And that's part of that nihilism, and that stuff you don't read very often. You don't. It's kind of it's gauche. It's like remember that there was an aliens movie where like there's these rules of horror movies, like you don't mess with pregnant women. And there was an aliens movie that they crossed that line, and it was not like a fun movie to watch because like I don't want to watch babies getting hurt. No one really wants to
Yeah,
watch that.
for sure.
This kind of has that vibe a little bit, but for me, I took that as a as something that he was purposefully trying to get across. But um, as the reader, I didn't take that necessarily as he's trying to browbeat me with nihilism. For me, it just felt like this is the world he is describing. It is brutal. It is stark. And if you read into his stuff, a lot of his influences, he talks about Tolkien and Dune, especially. And I hadn't read Dune when I read this the first time, and having read Dune and slaved my way through the second and third books, which were difficult for me, this idea of like to save everything, what would you do? Like, what lengths would you go to? What awful things? Like, what if the only way to save everything that was worth loving and having was to be a monster or to do terrible, awful things? And I think it's an intriguing idea, especially if we live in this culture and society where we consider ourselves moral. We don't like watching babies get hurt, type stuff. We also don't like seeing how the sausage is made. And that part of nihilism is really interesting because for me, it exposes this like dark underbelly of like what we know is going on. Like we know that there's like slave labor going into our iPhones, but it's uncomfortable to look at. Um,
Yeah, I guess for me, well, let's take like the metaphor of how the sausage is made,
mhm.
right? I mean, if it's you know, if people are being decent and like you and doing what they're supposed to do, and the chef is making things the right way, and he's held to a standard, like sausage, there's nothing gross that goes into sausage. Seeing how the sausage is made is actually perfectly reasonable thing to do. It might be very interesting and not disgusting at all, right? It's only
Mhm.
when you start assuming that things are horrible behind the scenes and you start making excuses for it, and it would, I don't want to get too sort of modern political, but like if everything is horrible, then it excuses horrible actions as sort of justifiable. And I
Mhm.
don't think that that's true. And so if you're putting these nihilistic ideas to paper and you're saying this is what the world is, because he didn't just to be clear, it's not just that people are doing bad things. The whole world building, all the world building, the everything in it is basically revolves around this sort of idea of like nothing is good, nothing is evil, nothing is
Mhm.
the sort of lack of morality, this lack of good, this lack of these things is like that's what you're choosing to put out into the world. That's what you're saying. This is my philosophy.
Mhm.
So I can't excuse him of that. And for me, like I am not a nihilist. Like I don't know, you probably know
I know you're
know
such a
that pretty like
humanist, Gus. Such a humanist.
like
Yeah, yeah.
uh you
Well,
know
to and you know what? I smell what you're cooking, and I'm with that. I think it's hard. This author is challenging because I think you're right. There's a responsibility for what he's putting out. It's hard because he does tie that in to the lore and the world building of this world. And maybe that's why it kind of hits different because it hits like when you go to a foreign country, and especially like Asian countries have this vibe. Like you realize that they have no Judeo-Christian background. Like if you go to Japan, there's just a different cultural
Mhm.
reference, a different base belief in like what humanity is, what we're supposed to do, what morality is. I am also humanist. I tend to think that like all these disaster movies where people just turn on each other. I'm like, that's bullshit. People, they come together, they support
Yeah,
their own.
did you know
Mm.
that there was actually a situation that was like Lord of the Flies, where a bunch of
Oh
schoolboys,
yeah.
where a bunch of schoolboys were stranded on a fucking uninhabited island, and not only did they not turn to shit and like turn on each other and like
They
smash
thrived,
piggy,
man. Yeah.
like they thrived.
Yes.
They came together and they thrived because that's what people do. And I don't I don't believe we're just, a bunch of like shitty, like, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, we're not all just a bunch of like shitty people who are just out for ourselves. Like I don't believe that. And
Yeah.
because most of the time, usually you see that people band together. Um, Sometimes people band together to do shitty things. Sometimes we're tribal and we really only give a shit about our little band or whatever. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think I think there is sort of an underlying shared morality
Mhm.
among most people.
Oh, dude. Well, and you know what's so uncomfortable about this book too is that any sort of so the main character, we're not going into too many spoilers, but the main character basically is nothing. He does not feel emotions. He does not display emotions. He actually has he's this monk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He everything he does.
Kelhus
Yes,
or
Anna
Anasurimbor Kelhus.
Sarembur.
Yeah.
Yeah, the names are interesting in these. But
Yeah.
that's an interesting philosophical bent too. It says that, and I think part of why I like this book too is that when Kellis interacts with the people, the normies, it's literally a mask. Like he can
Mm-hmm.
control his facial expressions, and he can see in others. He can basically read everybody like a book, and he's this master of it. But it's not in a human way. It's in a very exacting. Like there's a purpose to it. Um, and he's able to gain power. He's able to wield power, but yeah, philosophically, it's like all everything is just kind of learned behavior. There's no innate sense of goodness with this
Mm-hmm.
person. It's all kind of an act, which is a very nihilist thing too. It's like people are only good so they can get stuff for themselves or uh,
Mm-hmm.
to gain things. However, um, there's also a tie-in with religion. You have this holy war going on, and the culture of this place is a nihilistic culture. And dude, I have a hard time with that with authors. It's like, what's Wheel of Time? There's all people give it a lot of flack, like Robert Jordan flack for how he writes women, and I never really understood that because for me it was like, well, it's an author and he's not making a statement on what he thinks femininity is
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. This is just how the women in this particular part of the world act. They have braids, they tug them when they get angry. Like
Yeah.
that's how he's chosen to write the characters. And you don't have to read too much into that if you don't want to. Some people choose to. But I think in that you can read into this book and the characters, or you can take it as this is just the shitty world the author's made. And to his defense, he backs it up later. Like there are reasons why people are this way, and there are big things that have happened that have changed the culture to this point. No, at the same time though, I'm with you though. I There's not really any redeemable stuff that he writes in these. Like
Yeah.
the normies have
And
emotions, they feel sad.
yeah.
Um,
And I
but
haven't read. I will say all of this is with the. I have not read the the second and third books in the series. I've only read the first one.
yeah, yeah, but you're not wrong. It's yeah.
There were some characters. I mean, I will say that I think you're right about like the one of the things that I really did like about this book was the
Mm.
characterization. Knier was great.
Yeah,
I
scene
thought that
stealer, man. Oh,
yeah, every scene he's in, man, that Esminette was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Her character is a prostitute that is one of the other main characters, sort of lovers, and she kind of gets drawn into this whole thing through him, but also sort of through, yeah, just through sort of her association with him, because there's all kinds of political machinations
Yeah.
going on behind the scenes, and there's spies, and there's otherworldly, like, I don't know, I would call it is not divine, no divine, the opposite of divine shit,
Yeah.
shit going on. So yeah, so there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes, and these characters are, you know, forced might be the wrong word, but they're a lot of this sort of in these difficult situations, and she's a really interesting character because you first see her through the eyes of you first see her through the eyes of how are you saying that name? Achamian. I was a Achamian.
Aka. Call him Aka.
Aka.
Yeah, that's like his nickname by the end. It's Aka.
Yeah. Achamian, Aka. So you sort of first see her through his eyes, but then something this author does a lot, which I actually appreciate, is he'll have a chapter or two from one character's perspective, and then he'll just sort of fluidly switch to another character's perspective, maybe somebody you just met through the first character's perspective. He does this throughout this book. Yeah, I thought Confess was another interesting character.
Oh yeah,
Confess. He's a general. He's like the emperor's nephew, and his like greatest general. He's like a brilliant commander, young, commander. The whole book basically is these different factions trying to take control essentially of this holy war crusade thing that has been declared. And he's one of the players in that. So, and he's a really good, really interesting character. So it does, so I'm like, I got really frustrated, right, with the philosophy of the book, but there are some things about this book that are fantastic. Like some of these characters really interesting. I'm curious about what happens to Confess and Esminette, Achamian, Knier. There's some other characters where I don't really care about them though.
What's your take on Kellis? Because he's he's not the main character, but he's kind of the main character also.
He's a character around which a lot of this revolves.
Yeah.
It's sort of like he's like at the eye of the storm. I'm not a big fan in the first book anyway. I'm not a big fan of him. I think, I don't know, he seems, I don't know, what's a Mary Sue for dudes? What's that?
Yeah. Tommy Tim, or I don't know.
I don't know what I don't know what
there's a name for it. But because he can see everything and he knows everything basically. He's almost omniscient. Yeah. Like
he is. He's almost omniscient. And he's an amazing fighter. He's like seduces the Surway or whatever her name is, the slave girl, like just effortlessly, just by showing up basically. He's got Knier like following him around like lapdog, which is because he's so manipulative. He can just get what he wants by just existing practically. Like you talk about that skill that he has to just sort of, see what somebody is thinking, read them like a book. Yeah. And then including like all of the sort of complex actions they might try to take to manipulate him, and he understands them all implicitly, and he almost doesn't even have to think about it. It's just sort of second nature to him. And so I haven't read the next books, and I don't know what's going on or much about where he fucking came from, but he is, for me, he was a Mary Sue
boy.
But a boy. And I did not care. I did not particularly care for his character. I thought his character was a disruption in the whole story. And actually in the first third of the book, I was actually pretty into it. Well, maybe the first half. I was pretty into certain, because we were learning a lot about certain characters. We were following Achamian. We got into learning Knier and Confess, some of these storylines. And then when Kellis joins the story, I think that's when a lot of the sort of philosophical shit started too. Like it started leaning more into that. And it started really strong. And then Yeah, I did not care for his character, and he's kind of
It's
like the main thing. So
and it's funny that you say that because I think that was purposeful on the author's part, and it is revealed later, and I can't do it because spoilers, but the part that's interesting, I think this book could be a challenge for veteran readers, especially because there's a sensation where like if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, um, it's not always necessarily a duck. And his character, yeah, it's got the Mary Sue vibes to it, but the underpinnings of it are really interesting and they're different. Like the inhumanness of him is important.
mhm.
The fact that he is not, you don't get these chapters where you're inside his head and he's like, oh, I just really want her to like me, or I want this, is very, it's inhuman. Um,
Mhm.
and that's what's interesting to me because it is disruptive. It's alien almost, um, to like the other characters that are in there.
Mhm.
And especially knowing what I do about how the story ends up, it seems purposeful at this point. But it can be
Okay.
off-putting at first because yeah, it's like, come on. It's
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, dude, I have problems with this book. I really like it. It's hard for me to recommend it for others because it's kind of a downer in a lot of ways,
Yeah. There's
It's
I'll just say right now, there's like trigger warning for anybody who's like, you know, goes to read this book, like trigger warning. There's gonna be triggers.
yeah.
All the triggers.
Yeah,
Which ones? All of them.
all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who has a lot of those kinds of triggers, but like you will be triggered if you do. I'm just I can recognize them,
Yeah.
when I'm reading them. So
And I think that's where the edgelord stuff comes in with that because it's more grim than like Abercrombie because Abercrombie had lines
oh
he
yeah.
wouldn't really cross, and there
Yeah.
was a humor to it too. There was like humor to Abercrombie.
Oh yeah. There's like no humor in this book.
Oh no,
None. It's humorless,
and I think
which
that's
I
why.
always
Oh yeah,
which to me, like if I read something that's like this dark and completely humorless, I like I as shit starts like warning sirens start triggering in my head.
I think the hooks for his writing are the characters and the perspective and the interesting things that they come up with. And also like how the characters react to Kellis is very interesting because they don't understand what Kellis is. They don't they don't
I don't
know.
understand what Kellis is.
Yeah,
So
and eventually you do.
yeah,
Eventually you realize,
sure.
but there's some interesting things in that. But yeah, it's not like Abercrombie where you're like, oh, thank goodness it's a Inquisitor Glatka chapter. I know there's going to be some hilarious, fucked up,
Yeah,
stuff.
like Abercrombie, like as fucked up as his stuff is, like sometimes,
Yeah,
like it's also entertaining and hilarious, and they're lovable characters and lovable people within them, like within the story, and people to
yeah,
root for. There's somebody to root for to
yeah,
some extent, even if they're flawed. There's something to root for.
yeah,
Um, and in this, I would say I have nobody to root for particularly.
yeah,
There's a bunch of people I would be kind of frightened of being in the same room with, you know what I mean? Like, and
yeah,
then some people I feel sorry for.
yeah,
Like, there are some characters that I definitely feel genuinely sorry for because this was like with this edgelord shit. Like, it seems like he goes out of his way
yes,
to like fuck over every character basically in some way, like whether it's like emotionally, physically, sexually, whatever it is, like everybody just gets like he just goes out of his way to do it
yep,
to his characters. It's like he's cruel to his characters. Like
yep.
there's not it's not often where I'm like something is wrong with this author.
This one got you, huh?
This
What's
one
going
got
on with
me.
this guy?
What is
Who
wrong
hurt
with
you?
R. Scott? Yeah, who
Who
hurt
hurt
R.
you?
Scott Bakker? Like, is he okay? He should probably like get some therapy. Like, genuinely, yeah, because and it's not even like I can deal with all of these things, but there's got to be like some sort of humanity on the other somewhere in it, and there's not in this.
Yeah, it's hard. I need to reread it. I think from my memory, it's purposeful. There's payoff. it's a unique, intriguing payoff too. It's otherworldly is a good way to describe it. Getting outside of our comfort zones is another one. I do too. Very I think that's an astute criticism of his, though. I think he could have accomplished it maybe without being as cruel to his game. And cruel is the word. It's like he's beating up on him. The way he ends everything and the way he ties everything up and the reasons why, they're pretty satisfying. So if you can get through it, there are things to latch onto to keep you like interested and keep you engaged. The characterization continues to be excellent. The world building, the lore continues to be excellent. And it really expands. And there are some scenes. I would even say it branches into the horror genre. So grimdark horror. And there's some stuff in there I still think about to these days. And maybe that's why this book is kind of a cool book, because it engages you in a way that not a lot of other books do. Now, I didn't find it to be like persuasive at all. Like I found myself railing against every little thing in there. Like, I don't think this is how people are.
Yeah.
And if people were like this, I don't know. That's not the world I'd want to live in. But it was an interesting exploration of what that type of world would be like. Yeah, it's a real trip. There's some cool stuff in there. But yeah, man, oof, hard to get through. Um,
Yeah.
so do you think you will be carrying on? What's your kind of final thing to say to potential readers or people that are into this? Like, do you think you'll be carrying on? Do you think you're going to give it a break? Like, do you need a palate
Well,
cleanser?
at a minimum, at an absolute minimum, I'm gonna need a while.
Uh,
At an absolute minimum. But yeah, I may never want to go back. I, this is one of those ones where it's um, and like I said, there's some things I liked about it. Some of the characters were some of them were really interesting. I do think the book is problematic in a whole bunch of ways. And the ideas are also pretty problematic. I think this is one I would say, like, if you really are, you like, for whatever reason, you're like, I love nihilism and I want to read more nihilistic fantasy and I want to read the grimmest, darkest shit that's ever been written. All right,
yeah, yeah,
go for it. But I'm not going to recommend this
yeah,
personally. I do not recommend this. So,
yeah.
I do have to say, I've been, I have looked up, and I do want to say, I've looked up some people discussing and actually found some discussing this work and actually found some quotes from R. Scott Bakker
Oh,
that are
really?
not okay. You could probably find it.
Yeah.
It's on his own WordPress, and there's just some concerning stuff in there about how he genuinely views the world, the way the book is written. So
Part of why this book kind of resonated with me when I read it is there are some spiritual components too. There's some kind of examining of what faith is, of what it means to believe in something that I think were interesting things to think about. Um, and I also think like hope is kind of a theme with these books where it is so dark, and yet the characters, if we're talking about humanism, one of the humanistic principles I believe in is that hope kind of springs eternal. It's kind of a human thing to keep hoping and keep trudging, even when things are really really shitty. And there is that in these books. Um, so I think for me, it can be useful, but there's a lot of stuff in there that's could be distracting from that kind of message and that vibe. And
mhm.
uh, and I don't really know if he needed to go quite so dark with the stuff. So yeah, it's a little hard to read. I think if you can keep going and if you can kind of take it for what it is, I think it's well worth it. I think there's some really good stuff in there. Yeah, I guess that's my recommendation, non-recommendation. Maybe
Yeah.
read it. Yeah, don't read it. Definitely Yeah, definitely know it's some heavy shit,
Yeah.
whatever you do. So it's got a pretty good I was looking got a pretty good community on Reddit. Pretty active community. Looks like there's a lot of people who like to talk about these books and think about them. I haven't read anything from the author though. I'm kind of afraid to because I don't want to ruin my kind of personal take on it. But I don't know. Do you think that stuff matters? Like I'm thinking over this has been the latest thing, like with what's her name, the Harry Potter lady.
Hmm.
You know, she's kind of controversial now, and there's people that are not reading her books because of her Twitter kind of persona and the type of stuff. So, Gus, you talked about how authors kind of own what they do. Um,
Yeah, I think it's I kind of take it on a case by case basis, and I think what
mm,
they write, what they write matters. I think if somebody writes, I think if you read Harry Potter, the Harry
mm,
Potter series, um, there's some really cool lessons for kids in that,
mm,
right? There are some, she does not seem to have a very dim view of people, and she has a sort of a high view of people standing up for each other and for what's right, and I mean, is it the most, I don't know, does it address, I don't know, it was written, it's a product of its time too, right? I think,
mm,
um, I think that writers are, responsible for what they put down on paper.
mm.
They're responsible for thinking it through, or they're responsible for the message it sends. Should I not read Harry Potter because J.K. Rowling has since come out as being turf,
Mm-hmm.
trans exclusionary feminist, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, should I not read her work because of that? I don't know. That's a hard one for me.
Yeah.
Can I separate the work from the writer? I don't know. Sometimes not. I think there's some interesting ones like David Eddings
Yeah.
and all the shit that he and his wife apparently did. And
Yeah.
the books are fantastic. The Bulgarian is something that I read when I was younger and adored at the time.
Oh,
And
dude, it
I
hits
haven't
different when
gone.
you know, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. I have not gone back and read it, but can you separate uh the artist from the art? Can you separate those things? Are they, I think you can to some extent. If, for example, I mean, go back and read The Hobbit.
Mm-hmm.
It's anti-Semitic as hell. The dwarves are a caricature of Jewish people and
Oh, is
Jewish
it
things.
really?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, don't ruin the Hobbit
Um,
for me, Gus.
uh, you know, um,
Maybe
there's a lot
that's
of
why I never
racism. Go
liked the
read
Hobbit.
Jules Verne. As racism left and right. Anytime a character or anytime one of his stories goes to Africa, good look out.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty fucked up, right?
Yeah.
So some things are like they're a product of their time, um, and you can kind of hand wave it and say, well, it was a product of its time, but look at all the amazing ideas in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's The Hobbit, Robert E. Howard, Conan, H.P. Lovecraft was incredibly racist. Can you separate these incredible works and some of the works that they did from? Well, yeah, because for the most part, those things don't come through as like the underlying like linchpin ideas in their works for
Yeah.
the most part. With our Scott Bakker, he's still alive, still relatively young. I mean, he's in his 50s. He's still writing,
Yeah.
and his ideas, the linchpin underlying ideas, are super shitty. And
And he talks about it on social
talk,
media.
yes, and he
Like,
talks about it on social media in really shitty ways.
yeah.
And I can't recommend this. I can't recommend the author. I can't separate him from his work because they're the same thing in this case. It's not like with some things where like we didn't even know like as a society anyway. Like we didn't. I mean, obviously, like trans people existed and like they were but like as a society, it was not something we were all dealing with. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
J.K. Rowling had opinions that were formed when she wrote Harry Potter about the subject. She didn't know it was a thing. It became a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not addressed in the book because we were all just sort of oblivious to it in like the fucking 90s and like early 2000s. It's a relatively recent thing
Yeah.
that has like for most of society, right? It's a relatively recent thing. Not that it didn't exist before, obviously, but today. So can you separate that work from the shit that she's saying today? Maybe, maybe not. Some people, everybody has to make that decision for themselves. I think some people will be like, no, I'm not going to read that to my children, or I'm not going to watch the movies, or I'm not going to buy the books or the
Yeah.
merch or whatever. And some people are going to be like, well, you know, my kids are super into it. Do I want to be like, you can't, thou shalt not read Harry Potter? I
Right.
don't know. I don't know. I have not made that choice to like completely cut off the Harry Potter stuff. I have
Do they I'm glad.
maybe I
Yeah.
should. Maybe I fucking should, but I haven't. And but I think that with R. Scott Bakker, it's such a philosophical book. It was written with these philosophies in mind, written with these shitty ideas in mind. He's talking about them actively. He is not like he's apologizing for it or not like, well, I didn't mean it like that, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Because
so,
I was like, yeah, like before I knew he wrote that, like I would have defended him in saying that this is simply a part of the book. This is simply the world he's written. And he's writing an idea, but yeah, it's like it changes the game a little bit when you realize, no, he's like a true believer. This is like a shtick, and maybe he's trying to, C.S. Lewis it, but like the anti C.S. Lewis,
yeah,
the no C.S. Lewis.
yeah.
Um,
And
so
I wonder,
yeah.
he has apparently a really fucking dim view of men, of other men. I want
Oh
to say
yeah.
this is not
Yeah.
necessarily a dim view of women. I mean, it sort of is, but it's all like there's a lack of agency,
Mhm.
right? Uh, and yeah, it's complicated. It's his ideas are fucked up and wholly his own,
Yeah.
uh,
Ugh.
and pretty uniquely kind of fucked up in their own way. And yeah, just don't
Interesting.
care for
Cool.
him. So
Oh man. Yeah, I really appreciate your perspective, Gus. That's interesting, especially since you write and yeah, I don't know if y'all know this, but Gus is he's read a lot of books. We both we're both huge book nerds. Gus has read a lot. So yeah, it's cool. And it's kind of a hot subject too, because we've never lived in an age where the author, after writing the book, goes on Twitter and then espouses their personal beliefs. Oh man, I
alrighty,
love the conversation this inspired, man. It's great chatting with
yeah,
you about it. Looking
yeah,
forward to this
that was
one.
great
And it
chat.
did turn to philosophy, so that's fun. Drams and philosophy. But yeah, man, you good? You got anything else to bring up with the book? They're in the dark. It's so dark there.
It's so dark. I don't have the lights on in the office, and it's night outside. So, well, hope you all have a good night. Hope you all enjoyed the chat about R. Scott Bakker's The Darkness That Comes Before. And hope you all enjoyed it and hope you all listen on the next one. So have a good night and
and stay gold. Gotta say it at this point.
yeah.
Yeah, stay gold, everybody. Thanks for listening.